Welcome back. I wanted to do a follow-up to my last quick video and make a card with you guys with the results. As you may recall, we were playing around with this prickly pear cupcake stamp set, and I stamped out the simplest one, and after the video, I watercolored it. So this is the results of that. And since we were talking about the sidekick, I thought it would be good to explain sort of where do you go from here, right? How do you cut these things out? So the first thing I want to do, and you can do this either with the scissors or I'm going to grab a trimmer, I think, is basically cut these down so they're about this wide so it'll be easier to cut them out. You could even use like pencil marks if you're not familiar, but I usually just eyeball it. Here we go. So I think let me cut off some excess and then we can chat about color a little bit because it's worth thinking about at this stage, but I think we'll cut out everything and then figure it out. So there we go. There's one. And if I were doing this, not so much for a demo, typically I'll try and get as many images as I can to not create waste like that. But it's up to you. And I think particularly with watercolor or with some other coloring methods too, it's kind of nice to have a bunch of images that you can work on so you can basically shift as you go. So, a lot of stamp companies, including Prickly Pear, sell a coordinating die that goes with this, and this would work great in the Sidekick. So, let me pull this out. As the packaging says, it takes away the guesswork because then you don't have to cut it out. If you do have other means of doing so, you can certainly do that. But if you're used to doing sort of the cutting I did in the first video where you don't really have to line things up, this is a little bit trickier for two reasons. One, the top of the die is a pretty wide line, and then the inner part is not. So with your die, it's worth determining where this cutting edge is. On these, it's very close to this inner edge. So that'll be basically we just want to kind of center this. And then you need some way to hold this in place because it tends to move around. Um, typically, I've been using, so you want some kind of tape, basically. Typically, I've been using some of the yellow craft tape. Here we go. I've been using this yellow craft tape. This is from Spellbinders, although some people like mint tape. And anything you have really will work. You just want it to be low tack because you don't want to rip up your nicely made ephemera on the way out of this. And you can use a single piece of tape multiple times, as we'll do today. So I'm just going to get this what looks about even to me. And there we go. If you are interested in these specific stamps, there is a link in the description that will show you all that. But basically, it's just the same as before. We just run it through. I didn't mention this before. You will hear cracking sometimes. That's just the die cutting into the plate, so it's perfectly normal. Anyway, not something to worry about. Although, if you're new to die cutting, it can sometimes freak you out. And I'm going to be careful getting this out, and we got a pretty good cut. Nothing really left behind. We have a pretty even edge here as well. So let us grab the top piece to the cupcake, and we will do the same thing. I am a fan of these cupcakes for a few different reasons, but mostly because they're just pretty versatile. And here you see the bottom on this frosting. I believe it lines up exactly with one, but you can. Oh, I have it wrong. Well, that's another good lesson. Make sure you see this has a really small point that lines up with that little point of frosting, so that's how you know for this particular die. But if it seems like it's not lining up, it's really easy to get these things turned around. And then I'm going to just reuse the same piece of tape. I'm trying to get as much tape as possible just on the die because I really just need this to keep the die in place while I cut, but I don't really want to stick down the paper very much. I think we talked about this last time, but the more in the center your die is, the easier it's going to be to feed into your Sidekick or whatever other machine you use. And there we go. And this is I really like these cupcakes because they're a super nice size for a A2 card, which we will take a look at in a moment. So let's just break and I will cut out this guy, and then let's talk a little bit about color and card layout. And we are back again, and let's talk about some options with this card. So I grabbed a white card base because I feel like it's just a really good place to start in terms of a color palette because there is none. So we can decide which of these colors we like better. I kind of want to pull in pink because I've been in a spring mood, but so this is sort of so at a very high level, like we could make a very simple card and just have it be the cupcake, and we could put a sentiment of some sort. So that's sort of one option. That'll give you like a very flat looking card, which if you like that, if you go back on my channel, there's a easel birthday card that basically looks exactly like that, only with like a very thin mat of purple around it. That is a look that I do like. You can do a very thin sort of edge border of a particular color that's the same color in the cupcake. It's a nice way to do a monochromatic birthday card. I thought it would be fun to mix it up a little bit. So I just grabbed some pink because I want it to be spring. And then we could put this down. So what's the effect here? These colors are pretty close. Both are all the colors we're kind of playing with today are pastels, so there's no real difference in saturation. But the so basically red and purple are right next to each other on the color wheel. So we basically have a nice sort of analogous color palette here. We could just pull in any sentiment we want and we could go from there. If conversely we went and used the blue, blue is farther apart. I mean, blue is a primary, right? So blue is farther apart from red than purple would be. And I do like this personally. I think it gives a lot more visual interest. So I think I like the blue cupcake. You could do either. The other thing we kind of want to think about is this cupcake is kind of floating in space, and normally cupcakes don't do that. So even if you're working in sort of like this is a very sketchy style, but our brains still want to sort of perceive this as reality. So like this is going to look a little weird. Now, if we had the cupcake just sort of sitting down here on the bottom, that works. So we could have the cupcake like this, and then let's say use like this big birthday sentiment. That definitely will work. But I think what I want to do today is something a little different. I've been really liking these arches, and this is a faux glitter paper that I had in my stash. And the nice thing about arches to me is they look like windows, so they don't really, you can pretty much put them wherever you want. Because obviously, if we were looking at, let's say this is a wall of a bakery and there's a window in it, like that window could be high, the window could be low, whatever. And then what we can do is we can sort of ground our cupcake at the bottom. And that gives us some nice room up here to stamp a sentiment. And we could do that either in black or really any of the colors we're working with. So we basically have red and blue, which also, if we decided we wanted more colors here, would give us the option if you're thinking about, let me grab one here quick. Alrighty, so I'm back with the color wheel. So if we have basically pink, this is a magenta and cyan one, but if you have a normal school one, they work the same way. So we have pink, a lot of pink. We have blue, which we'll pretend is cyan here. These colors are a little bit this wheel's a little bit different, but let's say I'll just turn this so that it makes it easier. So we have red. Pink is a form of red, right? So we have this red. We're pulling in a blue. The color here is a little like with this color wheel, it feels more like you do cyan and then sorry, magenta and cyan. But anyway, that basically means you could have like a purple color in the mix here pretty easily or yellow. So basically either of these colors would work. And that will leave your colors equal distances apart on the color wheel, which generally makes them more visually pleasing to us. So that means we just need to figure out a sentiment. And I really like this Life is Sweeter with Cupcakes one, specifically because if you look at the sentiment, this Life is Sweeter is curved, as is the top of this window. So I think they will work quite nicely together. And I'm just going to line this up about here just to get the sense of it. So pretty much we just want to make sure that it's lined up with the outer corners inside this stitch detail. Anyway, so let us stamp that out. Our little color cat aside. And I guess I should say none of those options I think are going to yield a problematic card. I just think it just kind of depends what you like. And a lot of the like if you listen to people talk about card design, most of the ideas are coming just from like visual arts ideas. So like if you wound up doing like art appreciation at some point or art history or any of those kinds of classes in school, like a lot of that idea will transfer over. So what did I say? I said that we already have blue. So I think I will use my VersaFine Clair. This is like a very dark blue, whatever color this is. Twilight, which is basically a dark blue. It's darker than navy essentially. So I think that will just sort of really pop because it will be a essentially a different saturation than everything else on the card. But, again, a lot of this. And I love this ink because it stamps very nicely, which it did. Pigment ink does take a little bit longer to dry, so I'm going to be a little bit careful and give that a moment. We can start pulling this all together and see how we feel about it and what stuff we like and what maybe we don't love. I guess the other thing I didn't mention is this whole idea of ink edging around the side, like why do I do that? And basically it pulls your eye to the center of the card. And I just ran out of sticky tape, so I guess we will use blue for the rest of this. This probably doesn't need it because it's pretty much down. One of my friends gave me this great tip that so this is a really thin card base. If you're working with thinner card bases, that if you use dry adhesive on the first couple layers, it stops the card base from warping, which can sometimes be a problem. Anyway, with the dark on the edges, it's going to draw your eye towards the center here. So it's just sort of a nice visual like a visual suggestion. A lot of times too, if you have sort of a diagonal line that sort of draws your eye through the project, that's a technique you'll see people do as well. It's typically called leading lines. So if you think of it like think of a road going off into the distance, it's going to sort of pull your eye through whatever you're looking at. Um, and that's why in a lot of landscape paintings too, you'll see a road sort of coming from somewhere here going off into the distance, and that's just sort of to give people observing the painting like an idea of what to look at. I'm sort of just looking to land this in the center. If you want to sort of set this off visually, you could of course cut another one of these and just offset it to give sort of a shadow layer, or you could you could just cut a larger shadow layer. A lot of these sorts of die sets come with sort of multiple sort of concentric. Concentric is probably the wrong word, but different sizes of the same die, which makes them really nice and gives you a lot of flexibility. They're the kind of die set that's going to really help you build your stash, where things that are more single purpose are not. So let's talk about something else that helps to sort of make this card more interesting. Is if we pop this up. So we could use a little foam tape and pop the top off, which will make it look a little more 3D. Here we go. Typically, if you keep scissors specifically for dealing with foam tape, it's kind of nice because then you don't get stickiness everywhere else. I sometimes do that and sometimes forget and use my nice scissors and then have to use Goo Gone to get all the adhesive off them. So today we're using the right scissors, so that's good. And if you start to put this down and say, hey, that corner is going to be in the way, you can just nip that off quite nicely. So this is sort of what the look will be with this popped up because you get a nice little real shadow there, which I think helps give you a vibe of like a 3D cupcake. Again, you can also you could do this not that way and also have a pretty cool looking card. Just making a really flat card can sometimes be kind of fun too. Um, just because it's a little not expected. And I think they just have like an interesting look to them. Like, I mean, I think a card that's sort of designed to look flat works nicely. So, I think we are pretty have a guard. And this is the piece that we saw all the way through from stamping until done. And if you look at it, I think it's a very fun little card. And I think the use of blue and pink together also makes it a little more gender neutral in terms of who is this card going to, if that's the thing that matters to you. I tend to like to take cards like this, and I really like sentiments like this one that are not so like this could be a birthday sentiment, but it doesn't have to be a birthday sentiment. So I tend to really like stuff like that where I can take this card and then I leave the inside blank, and then you could grab one of these more specific sentiments that's about, say happy holidays or happy birthday or you got this or whatever. So you can always sort of change the feel of the card by putting something on the inside. But anyway, that is, I don't know, a fairly lengthy chat of how to make a card that looks like this that is just basically going all the way from start to finish. So hopefully this was helpful, and I will chat you guys later.